Hello, everyone. Welcome to the podcast. This is Eardstepa's Academy. This podcast will be covering philosophy and literature. But before I get into what the podcast is going to be, I'd just like to give you a little bit of an introduction of who I am. My name is Paul Cady. I have degrees in philosophy and literature for my BA, and my MA is in literary theory. I also taught college for 11 years at various colleges. I've written and published 10 books. I'm working on a book of philosophy and philosophical counseling. So I have quite a few things going on. I do have the earlier podcast that I did, Eardstepa's Courses. This podcast will have some overlap with that one, but I highly recommend that one if you want to get a little more background on some of the stuff we'll be doing on here. That is available through Amazon. It's available through Spotify. It's available through Google Podcasts and quite a few, Apple also. So that one is, again, called Eardstepa's Courses. This one is going to be taking advantage of the video format. Eventually, we will have things that will be a little more visual. I will tell you, I am a literature and philosophy person, so that means my technical skills are not the greatest, but these are not fields that really push you into that. And one of the things that I want to do with this is, even though I'm putting it on a electronic media, I am trying to get you to be a little more old school with thinking and slowing down a little bit from the digital age. So even when I do add visual things, it won't be a lot of flashy things. It might be something as high tech as maybe a blackboard or a whiteboard. And this is done intentionally. Again, one of the things that happens with electronic media is you tend to become overstimulated in ways that distract you from thinking. And I want to keep this focused on thinking. And I want to give this through the lens, both the philosophy and the literature, of my philosophy, which is a philosophy of narrative. All philosophies and literary ideas break down into narratives. Your personal philosophy is a narrative. It's the way you view the world. So when you look at something that happens in your daily life, in order to make sense of it, you have to kind of fit it into the narrative of how you view the world. And if it doesn't fit in easily with how you view the world, this is where, occurrences that you run into may be extremely disturbing. So this philosophy and literature is going to be discussing everything through the lens of narrative, and also discussing it through the lens of how is this stuff practical. When I got into literature and philosophy, I didn't get into them because they were topics that I felt talked about things that were not important in daily life. And these are things that are very applicable to daily life. Let me give you an example. Your political beliefs. All political beliefs, political science started out as political theory. It started out as philosophy. If you're a scientist, all of the sciences started in philosophy. And even the scientific method was developed by a philosopher. Chemistry, biology, earth science, astronomy, you name it, all of them started in philosophy. The same with the social sciences. Psychology and sociology, if you look at the first psychologists and sociologists, they were philosophers. And they are still fields that engage in philosophy. So what we talk about in here is not only going to be things that are, a little bit deeper thoughts, but we're going to try to show how those deeper thoughts and those deeper ideas could be incorporated into daily life and have been incorporated into daily life. Even economic theory started as philosophy. Marx and Adam Smith were both philosophers who turned their philosophy into a science. So we will be discussing a lot of topics. I will be doing some background lectures as well in the beginning. This is because I don't expect for people to have a full-blown degree in philosophy and literature in order to follow this course. This is something I want people to be able to, starting from a position of not having any background in these, start watching these podcasts and get a better understanding. I will also try to put uh, tags on each of the podcasts as I put them out so that while ideally you would listen to them or watch them in order, you may be able to skip around. If you see a topic that is of particular interest to you, uh, you can skip around. One of the things that I do plan on doing is I will not be doing cuts and takes. If I make mistakes while I'm doing this, they're going to be there because I want to run this exactly the way I ran my class when I was teaching. I didn't get the pause, back up, fix it, edit it, and then put it out to the class. They got it the way it was presented. I also feel that if things are too polished, they have a sense of being artificial. And so I want this to be more natural feeling. I want this to be more laid back. I don't want this to be something where you feel like, you're going to be uh, pulled apart at every seam by a thinker who just wants to overwhelm you. This should be something you come to casually because this should be something that does, as I said, apply to your daily life. What I'm doing with these is not trying to erase your personal philosophies that you've all developed. Everybody has personal philosophies. If you didn't have a personal philosophy, you couldn't figure out how to deal with anything. Most people's philosophies come from parents, peers, education, their religion, but also in the modern era, a lot of your philosophies come from uh, digital and electronic media. It also comes from old school media like books. But people don't realize how much these things affect the way you see the world. When you watch shows or read stories over and over again, even if you think these are just fluff stories, they are full of philosophy because you see certain behaviors, certain types that are going to be rewarded, and certain behaviors or certain types that are going to be punished. And this is the way that a lot of people get their philosophy is passively. And so, one of the things that I want to do with this is kind of draw your attention to it. So, this is part of why I've combined the two fields of philosophy and literature. Because when we do literature, it's going to be a lot of literary analysis. And I will have a section on different types of literary analysis that I'll be using because you want to be able to really break a work of literature down and be able to say, what is this saying? Do I agree with what it's saying? Do I disagree with what it's saying? This might sound like it's ruining all of the fun of watching television shows, but one of the things that is essential for anyone in a modern world where voting is allowed and where you're supposed to be helping to make decisions is you need to be able to see which ideas are actually ones that hold a lot of weight and which ideas are fluff ideas, which ideas are swaying you in ways that you don't even realize. You can't realize you're being manipulated if you don't see the manipulation. You don't know that it's there. And one of the things that hopefully these the series will do is help you not only to be exposed to different types of philosophies and compare them with yourself and see how your own personal philosophy matches up. And what you may find is some of the ideas we talk about might be ideas you decide, yes, that's wonderful. I'm going to incorporate it into my system. Some of them you might decide, that's just not for me and set it aside. There is no one correct philosophy. Every philosopher that tried to build a system, from Plato to uh, Husserl to Hume, Heidegger, Sartre, all of them tried to build a system. And the thing that happens is no system can fully work. All systems are going to be very limited, and like anything else that's built, it'll also break down at certain points. So you're going to find as we go through this, some of the ideas you're going to think, that's a great idea. I want to incorporate that. Others are going to be, yeah, that doesn't seem to hold up. And that's the point of this. It's to get you thinking. It's to get you looking at the world around you and seeing how much of it is something that is for you and how much of it is something that is just baggage that's been handed to you. As I mentioned, I'm working on a book on philosophy and philosophical counseling. One of the areas that philosophy has fallen down on is getting into practical day-to-day world and trying to examine it and look at solutions. Starting really in the 20th century, you start to get philosophy moving into the world of academia, and philosophy teachers, they taught philosophy to other people who would become philosophy teachers, and they sort of backed out of the political realm. They backed out of the social. They backed out of the ethical, and they said, well, let's just let the other scientists handle these. Well, the problem with that is that sometimes within a science, you get so engaged in the numbers and in the facts that you lose the ability to step back and say, I'm finding out all of these things, but what is the use of these things? How can these things be applied, or should they even be applied? Is what we're doing something that we should be walking away from completely? Now, most technologies are not going to be either good or bad. They will be things that you can do either one with. And I was teaching, I would always give the example of, different tools are limited in their usefulness. Take, for example, a hammer. A hammer is something that you can use to build with. You can use to take apart and rebuild with. You can do all kinds of positive things with it. It is a technology. So you can use it for a lot of good. You can also use it as an implement of murder. There is, the negative side of every philosophy, or of every technology has positive and negative uses. There's also the issue when it comes to technology is how much of the technology are we using as a tool to help us to make our lives better, and how much are we using this technology to basically make us dependent upon it. One of the things that I always try to bring out in my classes is that you should always know how to do things the manual way as well as the tech way. Doing things with technology is wonderful. It can be a time saver. But what do you do if the technology fails or if the technology is wrong? You have to be able to have the confidence to say, okay, I can go back and do this manually. I can do this without the technology if I absolutely have to. This is another part of the reason that I'm kind of staying low tech with this podcast. There's not going to be a lot of flashy visuals and things like that. Like I said, there may be eventually the introduction of a chalkboard. We may do a little bit of grammar for people who struggle with that, because believe it or not, having a good grasp of grammar is a good stepping stone to having a good grasp of logic. If you don't understand grammar, which is the logic of your language, getting into some of the other types of logics can be even more daunting. And we will be talking about different kinds of logic as well as part of the philosophy. Things like inductive and deductive, and how their uses are, and where are the, sort of falling down points, things that they fail at. And we'll also talk about this with every philosophy. Every philosophy that's I've come across has some really strong, powerful points, and it also has points where you just look at it and say, you kind of missed it there. You kind of, dropped the ball on this one. But people have blind spots. Everybody. This includes me. This includes you. This includes everyone. You're going to have blind spots, no matter how brilliant you are. And so another thing that I always try to encourage people that listen to my podcast or that were in my classes is for you to not assume everything I say is 100% the way it is. Take even everything I say with a bit of skepticism, because it's not that I'm deliberately out to mislead people, but everybody has limits. Everybody has blind spots. There may be something that I say that turns out some other information comes up and it's not the case. This is not a failure. This is something that is part of the way that knowledge works. Um, as I mentioned with filming live, I don't know if it's coming over the sound or not, but I have a little miniature dachshund. He's discovered that I'm closed in the room, so he's whining under the door. Um, he may end up being parts of some of these podcasts. You may see me holding a little mini dachshund named Thomas, and that's, you know, he'll be my co-host, I guess, on some of the episodes. One thing you always need, I guess, is a good-looking co-host, and Thomas is a pretty good-looking little guy, so he might be mine. I'm going to cut off this introductory video here. I will start trying to put some of the content videos up. Hopefully, I might even get one up today. But I hope all of you are doing well. I hope all of you are staying safe, and I look forward to seeing you soon.